All right. Well, that worked pretty good, the light flickering thing. Yeah? I was like, how are we going to get people to come back? Because we don't have the TV in the lobby right now. The lobby is under construction, so I was like, So I just thought of, my days in theater, how we would get people to come back for intermission. So I did that. Then it worked really well. It's like ingrained in people's heads. Oh, the light's flickering. That must mean... It was pretty cool to watch, actually. It was like, whoop. So maybe I'll make a video next week of that so we can show you guys what that looked like. That was cool. Well, welcome back, and welcome to those of you who are watching online to our service. I'm going to invite up our speaker this morning, Kendal. Kendal is not new to us. He's been here before, but Kendal is here again this morning to bring us the word and talk about his ministry here in southern Manitoba with the Alliance. Right. And new ventures and simple gatherings.
That's right.
That's what it's called. Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So I'm going to let Kendal take it away. Let's give Kendal another welcome.
Well, thank you very much. It's great to be back here. Like Pastor Dan said, I might be kind of a familiar face to some of you if you're wondering. I married into the Morden Alliance family. I am Menno Hebert's son-in-law. So I know I get like big points for that. But it also means I'm Judy Hebert's son-in-law. And all I can say in my defense is it was kind of a package deal. So anyway, Pastor Stafford did ask me to give a little bit of an update about our new venture, which is Simple Gatherings, the house church that I am co-leading over in Rosenort, where we live now with our family. So Jason Peters and I are co-elders of this house church that we've established in Rosenort, and Morden Alliance has kind of heard some updates, and I think some of you might kind of contribute through the New Ventures website to our work. I don't really know, but if you do, like, way to go. But the work is really thriving. The last sort of year and a half, we've established a solid core group. We have basically filled the house, and we have a really committed core of people that is gathering every week, to the point where we've been talking for a number of months about multiplying, that we're too big. If everybody shows up, we're in a little bit of trouble. So we meet every Sunday morning in someone's living room, and we have a teaching time, we sing some songs, we have a bit of a Sunday school program for the kids, then we have a potluck meal together every Sunday, and the group is really getting established. We had our first baptism in November in a hot tub in the house where we meet. We had our next baptism service 2 weeks ago. 4 people were baptized in a backyard pool in Rosenort, and then last week, we had another baptism, actually, in another backyard pool. So we've sort of christened 3 different pools and hot tubs in the area already. And so it's been really neat to see people really diving into the Word and getting to know each other really, really well, as you can imagine, eating together every week and spending so much time together. And the last thing I'll say is we have identified 3 other key leaders. Like Jason and I have identified 3 other key leaders that we're beginning training as elders of the next house church. In July, we'll meet for the first time in Morris. In August, we'll meet there again. And then in September, we'll be launching our Morris site. So we are actually multiplying into Morris and starting up our second site. So I would appreciate your prayer for that. If you've ever been a part of sort of a house church or any small group that gets really gels, everyone gets that multiplying is a good idea, but it feels more like division. And so just the push to actually break out and start that new group, I know that's where the Lord is leading us, so I'd appreciate your prayer for that. Anyway, that is enough about Simple Gatherings. I am here today to kick off this new series. And first, I want to introduce you to our pigs. So every spring, we have about, 4 or 5 little piglets that we get, and we raise them on our little hobby farm all summer. And I won't tell you what happens after that, but they're wonderful. And when they first arrive, they are barely weaned. Like, these are kind of rescue pigs. They would have been disposed of, and we kind of rescue them and then raise them, but they are barely weaned, which means, for anyone that doesn't know, they have been nursing from their mom, but they haven't figured out yet how to eat out of a bowl or anything like that, and they haven't figured out how to drink out of a bowl. They basically just know how to nurse. And so we keep them inside until they start to figure it out, which often means mixing up and trying to kind of splat some milk on their noses and get them figuring out that it's time to eat. Now, the feed is pretty easy. They take to feeding pretty quick. They're pigs. It kind of comes real natural. But it's actually really hard to keep fresh water on hand. As you can imagine, a bowl of water in the pig pen quickly gets spilled, fouled, and so it feels like for the first while you're just constantly in there trying to clean out and refresh this bowl of water. It's always a relief when I can finally let them outside, because they have a little door that goes out into the back part of their pen, and they can start to use the automatic waterer. The automatic waterer is basically a nozzle on the end of a garden hose. And the pigs can go over and press their snout up against that little nozzle, and as soon as they push that, they just get sprayed with an unlimited amount of pure, fresh, clean, life-giving water. Now, there's a little trick to it, a handy little trick. I don't know how long it would normally take for them to wander around outside exploring before they bump up against the nozzle and sort of discover this new source of water. So I learned a fancy trick from an old farmer, and I just smear some peanut butter on the end of that nozzle the first day I open the door. And then it takes very little time for them to find the peanut butter. And when they get in there trying to lick all and eat all around that nozzle, they quickly figure out where all this water is coming from, and they don't go back to the bowl. After that, they don't bother with the bowl. I want you to keep all of that in the back of your mind as we start into this new sermon series. For the next 3 weeks, we're going to be, not me, I'm kind of launching the series today, but a couple other speakers are going to be carrying it through. And we're diving into the book of Proverbs with a series entitled, I Pity the Fool. Or if you are a child of the 80s like I am, I pity a fool. You remember Mr. T? I know it's bad. I practice too, but I really am not good at impressions. But the book of Proverbs is a book full of ancient wisdom, and so this series is going to be geared towards applying ancient wisdom to modern living. If you think it has anything to do with modern living, I think you will by the time that we're done. The book of Proverbs really launches, and Solomon writes the bulk of it, and one of his main themes as he dives into this book of Proverbs is this idea: get wisdom. Get wisdom. So turn to Proverbs 4 if you have your Bible or your app and you want to kind of follow along. But in Proverbs chapter 4, there's a nice lengthy little passage where Solomon's talking about the lessons his dad taught him. So who was King Solomon's dad? Anybody? King David. King David. And so Solomon starts to talk about when he was a child and the things his dad urged him and kind of ingrained in him. And this theme starts to emerge that carries through the rest of the book of Proverbs. This idea of how important it is to get wisdom. So let's start reading at Proverbs 4, verse 3. Remember, Solomon. He says, "When I was a boy in my father's house, still tender, an only child of my mother, he taught me and said, 'Lay hold of my words with all your heart. Keep my commands and you will live. Get wisdom. Get understanding. Do not forget my words or swerve from them. Don't forsake wisdom, and she will protect you. Love her, and she will watch over you. Wisdom is supreme. Therefore, get wisdom. Though it cost all you have, get understanding. Esteem her, and she will exalt you. Embrace her, and she will honor you. She'll set a garland of grace on your head and present you with a crown of splendor. Listen, my son, accept what I say, and the years of your life will be many. I guide you in the way of wisdom and lead you along straight paths. When you walk, your steps will not be hampered. When you run, you will not stumble. Hold on to instruction. Do not let it go. Guard it well, for it is your life." So Solomon reflects on the lessons his dad taught him, and chief among them is this idea of chasing after and trying as hard as you can, though it costs you everything, to gain wisdom. And clearly Solomon took that to heart. Do you remember what Solomon's sort of famous for? Later in his life, King Solomon pleased the Lord so much. You can read about this in 1 Kings chapter 3. He pleased the Lord so much that God appeared to him in a dream and said, "Solomon, ask for anything and it's yours." And so Solomon asks for the wisdom to rule well. He's a young king and he asks for wisdom. God was so impressed that God says, "Fine, I will give you wisdom like the world has never seen." And beyond that, riches and honor. So it's kind of like he got everything because he sought wisdom first. And Solomon became one of the richest and is arguably the wisest man who ever lived, and became one of the most richest and influential kings of his day. In fact, I'll read you this little excerpt from 1 Kings chapter 4. This is a description of Solomon. Remember 1 Kings 3, he gets this wisdom from God. 1 Kings 4, it says, "God gave Solomon wisdom and very great insight and a breadth of understanding as measureless as the sand on the seashore. Solomon's wisdom was greater than the wisdom of all the men of the East, greater than all the wisdom of Egypt. He was wiser than any other man, including Ethan the Ezrahite, wiser than Heman, Calcol, and Darda, the sons of Mahal." So these would have been like people who were famous for their knowledge at the time. "And his fame spread to all the surrounding nations. He spoke 3,000 proverbs." Oh, wonder where those are recorded. "And his songs numbered 1,005. He described plant life, from the cedar of Lebanon to the hyssop that grows out of walls. He also taught about animals and birds, reptiles and fish. Men of all nations came to listen to Solomon's wisdom, sent by all the kings of the world who had heard of his wisdom." So Solomon takes this to heart, this admonition from his dad, get wisdom. And he seeks wisdom and he asks God for wisdom, and God says, okay, and gives him this wisdom like the world has never seen. People came to sit at his feet, and we have the same privilege. That's what this series is about. We too are going to sit at the feet of Solomon and open the book of Proverbs, where much of his wisdom was recorded, and learn from him. There's a couple of strong implications here, several, I think, to this idea of getting wisdom. If we're encouraged to get wisdom, first of all, I think that means we don't start with it, right? Can we agree? Anyone here born wise? No hands. Okay, good. It means we don't start with it. Wisdom is something we have to acquire. And so that's the second implication, is it's actually out there. So wisdom, if we need to get it, we didn't start with it, but it is attainable. It's not sort of just a pipe dream. There is wisdom for living that I didn't start with, but I can gain. And I think the last implication that occurs to me is if I didn't start with it, but it is out there somewhere, it must come from somewhere. It must have a source. There must be a distinguishable source of wisdom. And actually, as I reflected on this message and prepared for this, I think there are numerous sources. There are numerous places that we can look for information and for understanding and for applying knowledge, which is wisdom. But not all sources are equal. Would you agree to that? Not all sources are equal. Just because it's on the internet, does that mean it's good information? And so I want to turn to James chapter 3, because James would agree there's multiple sources of wisdom. Now, by the way, for today's message, you might want to stick a piece of paper in Proverbs and then another one in James, because we're going to skip back and forth. James had a few really valuable things to say about wisdom. But this is what he says in James chapter 3. I'm going to take my own advice. James chapter 3, verse 13. James asks, "Who is wise and understanding among you? Let him show it by his good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom." So James kind of says, you know, who's a wise person? Not just a know-it-all. A wise person is someone who shows it, who lives their life out of a wisdom that they've acquired. It's like a foundation for their decisions. That's a wise person. They live their life out of wisdom. And then he warns, he says, but if you, say, harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, don't boast about it or deny the truth. Such wisdom doesn't come down from heaven, but it's earthly, unspiritual, of the devil. Where you have envy and selfish ambition, you find disorder and every evil practice. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is, first of all, pure, peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial, sincere. Peacemakers who sow in peace raise a harvest of righteousness. James teaches that there are places you can find wisdom, but they're not all equal, and pure wisdom comes from heaven. Pure wisdom comes from heaven. You know, I think today of other sources of wisdom, if you wanted to learn how to do something, if you were facing a tough decision in your life, you could watch TED Talks. You can always Google it, right? You could ask advice of someone. Maybe you'll choose well and they'll have good advice. Maybe you'll choose poorly and they'll have poor advice. Sometimes you can just follow your instincts, follow your gut, right? One of my favorite Proverbs, though, is Proverbs 14:12, which says, there is a way that seems right to a man, but in the end it leads to death. It's a warning that even your gut, whatever seems right, may not actually be the best course of action. So James warns that there are earthly sources, there are unspiritual sources, there's even devilish sources of wisdom out there. But pure wisdom comes from heaven. And Solomon agrees. If you go back to Proverbs chapter 2, this is what Solomon says, again, laying the foundation for the whole book. My son, Proverbs 2, verse 1, if you accept my words and store up my commands within you, turning your ear to wisdom and applying your heart to understanding, if you call out for insight and cry aloud for understanding. And if you look for it as for silver and search for it as for hidden treasure, then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. For the Lord gives wisdom, right? James says pure wisdom comes from heaven. The Lord gives wisdom. From his mouth come knowledge and understanding. He holds victory in store for the upright. He's a shield to those whose walk is blameless. He guards the course of the just, protects the way of his faithful ones. And then you will understand what is right and just and fair, every good path. For wisdom will enter your heart, and knowledge will be pleasant to your soul. Discretion will protect you, and wisdom will guard you. And he carries on, saying, wisdom, pure wisdom, it comes from the Lord's mouth. And it becomes a foundation for your whole life. If you want to do a little reading on your own later, read Proverbs 8. Proverbs 8 is really a beautiful, poetic chapter where Solomon kind of personifies wisdom. He calls her Lady Wisdom. And he talks about Lady Wisdom as being like one of the first things that God made. Before the foundations of the world were laid, God created Lady Wisdom. And then it talks about her being like a craftsman at his side as he laid the boundaries for the ocean and the stars in the sky and all of these things. It's a fascinating read, but I'm not going to take the time to read it for you right now. It goes on and talks about how the kings of the earth that rule well, they all rule by her. And it really drives home this point that if you're looking for wisdom to navigate this system, well, she wrote the book, right? If you're looking for wisdom, a true source of wisdom, and remember, there are good sources and not so good sources, why not go right to the hose, right? To the bottomless, pure source of all good, healthy wisdom. Okay. How do you access this wisdom from heaven? How do you learn from Lady Wisdom? How do you apply true wisdom in your life? You are going to dive into this over the next couple of weeks. I'm hoping some brilliant people are going to follow up with this and help you to dive into the book of Proverbs and really do what the theme for the series is, which is applying ancient wisdom to modern living. But I want to sort of kickstart and say it's actually very simple and very direct Scripture's encouragement of how to access wisdom. Wisdom is found by asking. It's just found by asking. So this is James. Remember? Who are the wise people that listened to me and stuck a piece of paper in your butt? James 1, verse 5. If any of you lacks wisdom, he should, anyone know what it says? Ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to him. If anyone lacks wisdom, he should ask, and it will be given. Isn't that what Solomon did? Solomon, what do you want? Wisdom? Done. Download. If it's that easy, though, why am I 48 and still not very bright? There's a song playing on the country radio station these days. It's called Need a Favor. And the guy, this is what the chorus says. The chorus says, I only talk to God when I need a favor. I only pray when I ain't got a prayer. Who am I to expect a Savior when I only talk to God if I need a favor? But God, I need a favor. That's his chorus. When I first heard the song, I thought, wow, that is like refreshingly honest and transparent. He goes on in the verses to sing about most Sundays he's hungover rather than in the pew, and that his King James is only saving dust on the shelf. So he's saying, like, he has these roots in the church, I'm sure, but he only talks to God as a last resort. You know, I'd heard the song many times, and then I was driving one day, and I suddenly realized I may be a lot more like that guy than I thought at first. In fact, it sort of hit me in the gut that I wonder if this chorus is actually true of me. If I think about my prayer life, if I think about my communion, my communication with God, if someone were to follow me around for a month and keep track of any time I've communicated with God, would they conclude that my prayer life is like a wish list? And that I only ask God when I exhaust all the other sources of wisdom I can find? Like, this was a really humbling thought. I only talk to God when I need a favor, and I only pray when I ain't got a prayer. Who am I to expect a Savior when I only talk to him when I need a favor, but I need another favor? Proverbs 3. You know this one, I think. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own what? Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge him. In all your ways, consult him. In all your ways, ask him. In all your ways, engage him. Look to him. And he will direct your paths. I haven't told you anything today that you didn't already know. But I hope I've put a little peanut butter on the nozzle. I hope in my life that I start to find the pure, unlimited, life-giving, clean, cold water of wisdom. And that I don't go back to the bowl anymore. Because it's right there for the having. I'm going to give you a benediction and cut you loose. But I guess I'm thinking this is a benediction, like a blessing, but I wonder if maybe it can be a prayer. Maybe you've been sitting here today thinking, that chorus is kind of true of me, and I don't want it to be true of me. Why am I passing past the hose and scrounging in the mud for direction in my life? If you want to make this a prayer, if you want to see this month of July in this series sort of open a new connection with God regarding wisdom and direction in your life, if you want to hear his voice more clearly, then I'm just going to ask you to hold out your hands like this and make this your prayer as I close our service with this benediction. So this was actually Paul's prayer for the church in Ephesus. And I'm going to make it a prayer of mine for me and for you today. He says, I keep asking that the God of our Lord Jesus Christ, the glorious Father, may give you the spirit of wisdom and revelation so that you may know him better. I pray also that the eyes of your heart may be enlightened in order that you may know the hope to which he's called you, the riches of his glorious inheritance in the saints, and his incomparably great power for us who believe. May it be so. God bless you in your search. May you become well acquainted with Lady Wisdom, and go in peace.